Welcome back to On the Way, and today will be slightly special. I would say not really special, but usually I will be doing my podcast with my friends, and today I will be collaborating with Roa from currently in Canada. I think my similarity with her would be like our ethnicity are not. I'm Chinese, but Malaysian-born Chinese, and then your ethnicity is from Korea, but then you're living in Canada. It's kind of like sometimes it's a bit confusing when people assuming you from some different places. Yeah, welcome, Roa. Did I pronounce it
Hi.
correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, since you can speak Korean, usually your Korean is like kind of like self-study, or since you are young and then like your mom or someone teach you, or is it from your school?
Yeah, so I was actually born in Korea and then I moved to Canada when I was really young. So I grew up in Canada speaking English and French. I actually went to a French elementary and high school, and then I did post-secondary in English. But at home, we still spoke in Korean. I learned how to write and read when I was really young. I think even before I came here in pre-kindergarten, we had learned how to read and write the basics. And so when I moved here and I was really young, I didn't go to school right away because I was 6. And so I was too young to go into first grade. But my mom would she taught me Korean, among other things. And so, yeah, it's my mother tongue. It's not my most comfortable language. I'm actually more comfortable with English. But when I started, so later on in my lifetime, maybe when I was late teens and early 20s, I started wanting to know more Korean, as in I wanted to be better at it. And so I started learning Chinese characters because I know the Korean language uses Hanja, which is basically Chinese characters. And so I've been kind of into that for a while now.
I mean, since you are staying in Canada, right, and then like, is there any other friends like either Korean or like someone else that can speak Korean to you, other than your family members?
Sure. In college, I met a number of Korean friends. So before college, this is when I was 17, 18, 19 years old. Before that, in high school and elementary school, I had no Korean friends just because there weren't many Koreans around. And then I went to college in the same city, but it's a college where a lot of Asians go. And so I met a number of Korean friends among other Asian friends. So that's where I made all of my Asian friends. And I still pretty much have the same friends until now. Yeah.
Like, if one day you are going back to like Korean or like meeting your Korean family, do you think you can still speak like at least fluent Korean, like a common Korean accent or something? Like, since you are
So,
used to English.
uh-huh. So apparently, I can't hear it myself, but I'm sure I have an English accent when I speak Korean. Like you can tell, well, like people can tell. I don't know, but so they would be able to tell, but I would definitely be able to converse with anyone, even with adults. And I say that because it's a little more difficult to speak with adults. I mean, in Chinese, I mean, I know you speak a number of different languages too, but you have honorifics too? Like when you speak to adults, like the words change because you want to be more polite. Is that a thing?
Yes, but not really. But because like I would say Malaysian Chinese is kind of like a confusing race. I would say, like, not to say racist or something, because if you see Malaysian Chinese and Singaporean Chinese, okay, Singapore once was a part of Malaysia, but then they get their independence. Like, I forgot which year. I didn't study that part. Okay, but anyway, I don't. I hope my history teacher will know that. Okay, but like, because our accent, I mean, if you can speak Mandarin, I mean, to be specific, Mandarin, you go to like Taiwan, you go to Hong Kong, China, our accents are way different, and then we have our own words. And
Oh,
which is why,
okay.
like, how to say, some people they would think like, oh, you are so talented and something, but then we are just used to it. This is something we are
Oh,
doing every
okay.
day.
I'm actually so curious about all of the language that you know and the languages that the people around you know. So, what languages do you know? Let's start with that.
My mother tongue, if you want to be too specific, I don't think it's Mandarin, but yeah, for Chinese, ethnics will be Mandarin. And then since I'm living around this area, most of them, if for Chinese dialects, I can speak Cantonese. And then for Hokkien, is not that fluent, but I roughly can understand because Hokkien in Malaysia and different states, and also from like Taiwan or in China is also different. Although it's the
Mhm.
same Hokkien, the accent, all those are different. And then my national language, Malay, I think I kind of almost forgot how to speak fluently because Malay for us, right, most of us, I think it's kind of like you can if like I think being Malaysian, right, even if your mother tongue is Malay, like if you are the Malay, you are the Malay race, like if you go to like university or somewhere else, if your university is speaking English, and then sometimes your Malay or like your mother tongue will be slowly faded or something like
Mhm.
because you're getting used to another language, and then when you go
Mhm.
back to your family, your accent is going away. It's no longer the
Mhm.
same. That's why you can either categorize it as like okay, maybe for Chinese, these Chinese can speak fluent Chinese accent with some of them they even have the typical like Beijing accent or something, and
Uh-huh.
like for me, I will be I think at least the basics ones because we speak too many languages. We cannot speak one for the fluent one. So it's like mixing of everything.
Yes, you also speak English really well, which I was very surprised when you messaged me the first time. So which language are you most comfortable with, honestly?
Um,
If you had to pick one.
Either Mandarin or English, but sometimes I don't really like to speak Mandarin is because like sometimes some of my friends, I don't know why, is it like they like to pretend to have the so-called like Chinese accent, and then when I don't have the proper accent, it's kind of like making fun of them or something. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
so and if I'm speaking English right for my Chinese friend groups their English will be not that good, and then when I'm with them, my English suddenly became so good. If I want to compare to them, it's like
Uh-huh.
if I'm the last place, is it last place? I'm like the ranking one, I'm the lowest one, and when I'm with my friends, suddenly I'm way higher than them because they are even lower than that. Sometimes like that.
Uh-huh. That's so interesting. I also wanted to know, when did you learn English? Like, how old were you when you started learning English?
I think since 4 or 5, because my parents sent me to like a kindergarten that have English. Like I mean, usually they speak English in kindergarten, but then
Mhm.
since I think 7 years old, yeah, standard one, primary school, yeah, is it elementary school or primary school, yeah. Since 7 years old until like 17 years old, I'm in the like national school, and then most of them, I mean, because we have a bit like separation of it. For me, it's like national Chinese school, and most of them they speak Mandarin, and then I
Mhm.
kind of like confused in the environment because they don't speak like how I was in kindergarten. And
Mhm.
it's kind of like you need a switch or like a plug to go and change your language.
Mhm.
And after that, they even like I think the teachers they started to speak Malay and something, and then I'm like, oh, so I need to learn another language again. So
Mhm.
it's like not just languages and also different dialects. I'm like, so how should I score all three different languages or like more than that when there are other subjects too?
Mhm. That's so much. But is it a common thing for Malaysian kids to learn English so young, or did you learn it at a younger age compared to your friends?
No, I would say it depends lah because some parents like they have the mindset like if you learn English earlier, like next time when you start to work, you can have a higher chance or something. Like, they think like
Mhm.
that, but
Mhm.
their English level are way lower than us. That's why they hope like one day maybe their children or something they can be successful or something like it's like a stereotype for those Chinese parents. Yeah, they
Mhm.
always have this mind.
Do you agree?
somewhat agree and somewhat disagree lah, because it's quite confusing. Like for example, during Chinese New Year, right? Like when I go to my dad's friend's house, like his friend like sometimes speak to me in English and then sometimes mix in Mandarin and then mix in Cantonese. I'm like, so which language do you want me to speak? Can you just just choose one?
Yeah.
Imagine someone preparing the subtitles. Which one do you want? Put three for you.
Oh, that's so interesting. I feel like it's kind of similar in my case where there are a good number of people. I mean, especially among my Korean friends, there's a good portion of them that also went to a French elementary school and high school. But for some reason, we've all learned English at some point in our lives. I mean, here, because I live in a French province, French is the official language, and we learn English as a second language. And so everyone gets English classes at some point, but as adult, people are just more comfortable with English. It's an easier language than French, I think, to speak. And so if they're also Korean and they speak Korean, we mix the three languages. I mix the three languages. Like there are certain words that are easier to say or express in a certain language, so we just mix the three, and it's kind of funny. But I think for you, it's that, but even more, because I feel like there are more languages. And yeah, that's so cool. I was actually also wondering, I have a lot of things I'm curious about because I don't know anyone Malaysian. I've never spoken to someone from Malaysia, and I don't know what your language is even like. So, what is your writing system? Is it like a phonetic alphabet, or do you have like you don't use Chinese characters, do you?
Yeah, for those who understand Chinese, but our official language is Malay, and
Yeah.
it's all Latin words. Yeah, just like English. Just that they have 25 alphabets. One alphabet missing. I don't know
So,
where's the one alphabet from.
wait, it's another alphabet or it's the same alphabet as English?
One alphabet left. Like in English there's 26 alphabet, right? In Malay there's only 25. I don't know where's X. X left.
Oh, but you use the same letters?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. Just that X is not there.
Really? Why? Where did that come from? Like, what was it before? Because it couldn't have been the Roman alphabet before. Like, I don't know history, okay? But like, it couldn't have been the Roman alphabet from the very start of the language. You know what I mean? Like, it must have been something else, and then it got Romanized. No?
I mean, for that, I'm not sure because I don't really study like those deep history. But yeah, back then they don't have a specific word because for Malaysia history, it's more like I mean back then when you have because we are also one of the British colonization
Right.
country, yeah. And before that, like Malaysian, most of them, I think, if they are Muslim or something, like they usually they use like Arabian words like Arabic, and then
Oh, okay.
from time to time, I mean, usually they use it for religion purpose lah, like for Islam or like for Muslim they will use it lah, and I mean the rest of us we rarely even touch it, so it's not our business. So I mean, for Malay will be the official language after we gain our independence. It's briefly like that, and which is why we are confused here. All of us are confused.
Yes. Now I am also confused. I'm so curious to know what it was before because okay, so again, I'm not like a history person. I actually did really badly in history at school, but after I graduated, I took somewhat of an interest in specific things. And recently, relatively recently, maybe last year, what I learned was that in Vietnam, they used Romanized alphabet letters too, except they like added accents and stuff because it's tonal. But maybe like 100 years ago, they used to use Chinese characters, and their language was almost very similar to Cantonese, and then it was Romanized. And now, this current generation of Vietnamese kids might not know that. And I was like, oh my god, they used to use Chinese characters and their language is like so similar to Cantonese, but they lost that. And it was also through colonization. They were a French colony for a while. And so that's why I'm thinking like for Malay, like I don't see how it was how the language used Roman alphabet from the very start. It must have been something else, and then they Romanized it through colonization. And so that I would be very interested to know that.
I think in a way, at least it makes them to learn the language easier. I think like the Romanized words, like I think
Sure, yeah.
I think most of the Asian countries they rarely even use Romanized words. That like you see Chinese, it's their own words, and then like Japanese and I think Japanese and Korean, is it like they are affected by the Chinese characters, and then like at least they have their own words. It's not like just all English words. It's kind of boring. That's why sometimes.
Yes, I agree. I mean, there is a certain ease when learning a phonetic alphabet. So when you write pronunciations, basically, when you write something and you know how to say it. In Korea, we have Hangul, which is a phonetic alphabet. So it's not English, it's Korean's own phonetic alphabet, and it's definitely easier to learn. I mean, there's a king that is very celebrated still now for have developed the alphabet from scratch, you know? Because before that, every commoner would not know how to write, and they would not know Chinese characters because, you know, they were mostly like farmers. Like they don't have time to study Chinese characters. And it was only the scholars who would go to China and learn the writing system and everything. And so commoners weren't able to read and write, which means they were so limited in terms of the information they would get. Like, for example, the government would put out some policy and they would, you know, make an announcement on paper and no one would be able to understand. Like, what is the point, you know? And so the king, his name is Sejong, he made an alphabet from scratch. And so that's what we use. And he made it so it would be easier for everyone to be able to write and communicate, which is so great. And I think he should be celebrated. But now, for me personally, the reason I started to learn Chinese characters is because that is also like another whole world of really cool stuff that you can learn. Because when you have a phonetic alphabet, the semantics disappear, meaning you might not know what it means. And just because you're able to say it right or pronounce it right, like doesn't necessarily mean you know the language, you know? And there's a lot of meaning behind certain words, meaning behind certain characters that are really cool to know to me. And so that's why I think knowing both is really, really nice. And I think what the Japanese language is doing is cool in that way because they use both. Right, so they have kanji, which is basically Chinese characters. Some characters have been simplified, but not to the degree of simplified Chinese. So I think it's mostly traditional, and there are certain things, certain strokes or radicals that have been simplified, but not a lot. And they also have their own phonetic alphabets. They have two. And so they, you know, everyone in the country, they know all of the three writing systems, which is, I think, pretty great. It conserves the semantics of the language and also puts in a possibility of just phoneticizing words, which is easier. So I think that's really cool. And in Korea, we don't use Hanja as much. Like, it's not as regular. It's not in everything that we read. But I think in school, students learn, I think, at least 1,000 characters. So it's not completely lost, you know? So I think that's pretty great.
I mean, like at least you can like study the origins of those words, like how to say. Because for me, I did learn Japanese, but then this is more like self-learn. It's not like the school asked me to learn or something.
Mm-hmm.
And also I think for Malaysians, I mean some Southeast Asian countries, because back then I forgot which year again, but yeah, during the Japanese occupation, like they came to like Malaysia, like and then Singapore. Some countries, some older generation, they can speak Japanese because of that. And then like for us, it's like we learn because either like anime or like those it's something that doesn't even affected by the history. It's that we explore it by ourselves. So it's a different story.
Yeah.
Like
How did you find it learning Japanese? What did you think?
I would say this is kind of funny lah, but then like I mean back then when I want to learn another foreign language, right, at first I thought like choosing either Thai or like Russian or something. But then apparently all those language I failed miserably It's too difficult. I
Okay.
failed.
Yeah.
And for Japanese, I think I would say I'm quite lucky because back then my grandmother, she used to work in Japan. I mean, back then before the custom, you know what happens, and before custom exists. Yeah, she went there and travel. I mean, not travel, start to work, and then like, she have all those Japanese learning books, those beginner stuff. And
Oh,
then
okay.
I kind of just take. I think I didn't even ask her permission, but I just take and refer. And then somehow she realized that okay, if you want to read, you can just read it. But then, and then I think after some time, I find it like quite easy because I mean since Japanese they have the kanji, right? And then the kanji and Chinese character are mostly similar.
Hmm.
And like it somehow helps me to learn like the traditional, I don't know how to say this, but like I think the previous words before the actual Chinese simplified characters, right? Like they have
The
different meaning.
traditional, yeah.
The traditional ones, because in Japanese, right, some words it's actually the traditional version, and then
Hmm.
when you really study the word, you realize, oh, this is actually the previous version, but then in Japanese it's the modernized version. So it makes me feel like, oh, you know, this helps me in both ways. Why not? So
Hmm.
until today, that's why I somehow managed to study Japanese more than other language.
Oh, I can totally relate. But actually, before I tell you about that, you know simplified Chinese?
For my school, yeah, since I forgot since which year, but yeah, back then they used to teach traditional Chinese. I forgot which year, but for me, yeah, I understand more about simplified Chinese. But usually when I type message to my friends, I'll use traditional Chinese because it
Oh,
improves
okay.
my Japanese kanji more because those words
Yeah.
are more to traditional Chinese.
But in Cantonese, maybe I'm mixing it up, but in Cantonese they use traditional, do they not?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you want to say Hong Kong, yes, Hong Kong they still use traditional Chinese.
Oh, okay, okay. So you can write in Cantonese too, as well as in Mandarin. Like you can write in all the languages that we just talked about.
For Cantonese, I'm not really fluent because it's exactly the same words, just that it sound different when it's in Cantonese.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean I can understand
Oh.
when they speak it out, but when I read those words, sometimes it's like what is this? Or when I go and check about it, like oh this meaning. It's just a simple conversation, but then they use a different word.
Uh-huh. Yeah, no, I'm asking because speaking a language and being able to read and write is completely different levels and one might not be able to read and write in a certain language. But yeah, I was just gonna say, the reason I started learning Japanese, like you were saying, I was never really, really serious about it either. I was just doing it on my own. But it was the only language that I felt like I could get anywhere with because it's so similar to Korean. I'm not a person who loves learning languages. Like some people are like that. It's just something that they love to do. Not me. I'm not like that. But I thought learning another language would make me smarter. Just to help me learn new things and whatever. And Japanese was the only one that I felt like I could actually get anywhere with. And I didn't even know this before I started, but Korean and Japanese, so similar. Like, I can't even tell you. Just so many sentences, so many words are like exactly the same, except it's pronounced differently.
Yeah, if you would like to put your rating, is it Japanese easier or Korean easier if you want to compare?
So there are aspects of each language that is more difficult than the other. So I would say what makes Japanese difficult is the different readings. Okay, so like you can have the same character, but it can be read in Chinese borrowed pronunciation or native. And like you just sort of have to know because you've seen that before, kind of thing. It's not as systematic. The nice thing, again, we're getting back to phonetic alphabet. The easier thing about Korean is that it's phonetic, so you know exactly how to read it. But in Korean, what's difficult, I think, is, I mean, I don't know if I could compare. I can't say if it's more difficult than Japanese, but something about Korean
I
is
mean,
really
I think it
hard.
depends. I think it depends. I mean, like for those who don't understand Korean and Japanese, like for those beginners, they'll be thinking like, okay, let me learn a new language. Korean, Japanese, they'll take Korean. And for me, like I learn Japanese. Like I don't know whether is it a good thing or bad thing. Some people like they look at me like, why are you learning Japanese? Japanese is so hard. Korean is way easier. I'm like, so
Okay.
I'm learning mine. You're learning yours. I'm not
Yeah,
doing the wrong thing. Yeah,
sure.
I don't know why.
No, you're absolutely not. But I feel like in Japanese, when you get past the different readings, otherwise it's mostly easier than Korean. There's something really hard about Korean, and I noticed this because I have a friend who is really interested in learning both. Okay, so Japanese and Korean. And he started with Japanese, but he's eventually going to get to Korean. And he already knows a little bit. So he asks me, like, what does this mean? What does that mean? Like, can you translate it? And, like, I realized that there are so many different ways of saying very similar things in Korean, and they're just slightly differently nuanced. And it's something that you can't easily explain. And it's something that if it's your mother tongue, you just know because you grew up with it. But like, there's a lot of things I can't explain when I translate something from Korean to English. And so I feel like for people out there learning Korean, it's gonna get hard. Like, the alphabet's easy, the reading is easy, the writing system is easy, but when you actually get into expressing yourself or like understanding someone else, it's quite difficult.
I think most of the people they usually learn Korean is like if you know all those like either K-pop or those K-drama, they'll be thinking like, oh, after you learn Korean, you'll be staying in the drama, but end up in real life, no one is even giving you anything.
No.
I mean,
I do
it's
think
exactly. I think it's exactly the same like how some people they think like, oh, you learn Japanese and then you speak like anime and like, do you need the bloody slap?
Do you understand? Yes, yes, yes. Oh my god.
Yeah, I think though, for people who love Korean entertainment, so like dramas, for example, to understand the language means you don't have to wait for subtitles. I think that's kind of convenient, you know? But otherwise, like, no, you're not gonna be living in a K-drama just because you know how to speak Korean. Maybe it's convenient, like, when you go travel there. Like, at some point, a lot of people want to visit Korea, and I guess you can, say a couple of things and communicate with people. That's kind of cool, you know?
I don't think anyone would be similar to me because like I think for any of my friends that at least like I mean either they learn from anime or like songs or okay like up to them I don't mind. Like sometimes when they look at the subtitles and then they understand the whole thing and then like for example in Japanese like if you ever heard of this word kuso, it can be either a bad way to say I mean it can be in a swear word or actually it's just a way to express something. It's like what the hell or something like that. But then they
Mm-hmm.
always put the subtitles as a swear word. That's why almost every single time, sometimes even when I'm watching Netflix, I look at the subtitles. I'm like, do you all even put effort to go and translate the thing? Is it that you just copy paste the thing and just throw it to Google Translate? Yeah, settle.
Yes. Yes. I mean, yeah, you bring up an interesting point where there's an inherent intranslatability to languages. Like, there are certain things that you just can't translate accurately, you know? And so when you read subtitles, you're never going to get 100% of what is being said. So yeah, I
Like
think.
I think like how my sister used to study yeah she used to study Malay from the Malay subtitles because our national television usually will have the Malay subtitles instead of like English or some other languages. So
Mhm.
like I think her Malay teacher like think since primary school I forgot primary secondary she just told me like the teacher asked us to if you don't really study, I mean, even if you study, sometimes you cannot remember everything, right? So what she suggests was like you just watch drama like on TV or something. You just look at the subtitles. But the thing is, if you look at the subtitles, it's wrongly translated. So if you write in the exam paper, what is it? What will happen? What is going to happen?
That's funny. Yeah. No, actually, I'm not as into it right now, but last year I was more into studying Japanese, and I would watch a Japanese movie and put on Japanese subtitles so I can read at the same time I listen, you know? And so like it would remind me of certain like vocabulary words that it sort of reinforces that so I can like read and listen at the same time. That kind of helped.
Sometimes I really hope the subtitles they have like at least two languages. Like sometimes when I'm watching a Japanese drama, right, sometimes I will get like Chinese subtitles and Japanese subtitles in between. Like sometimes up there, sometimes down there. It's like sometimes when I
What?
feel like if I feel like I don't really understand the word or something, I'll look at the Chinese subtitle. When I don't understand the Chinese subtitles, I just look at the Japanese ones. You'll be like, sometimes I just press the pause button and look at the subtitle. Wow, is this even translated? Wow.
Are you one of those people who likes to learn new languages?
I think yes lah, but because back then before I studied my degree, at first I thought I want to study those like linguistic studies, like at
Oh,
least you
okay.
I forgot how specific is it. Like my teacher used to say like, oh, if you want to study linguistic study, you have to learn like at least 7 languages or something. I'm like,
Oh,
you learn so
oh
many
my
languages
God.
for what?
Yeah.
I'm like, for what?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like because for me, I hope at first one of my dream job is to be a translator. Like
Oh, okay.
not as in just English or something. Like maybe it can be like translating a novel or something to another languages, or because for me, for my dad's mind, right, he what he literally said to me is like, in today's world, we have Google Translate. That's all he said. And I'm like,
It's
oh,
not that good
why
though.
not? I'm like, why not you just delete Google Translate and let your son be the translator? You can
Yeah.
save like 100 MB from your phone. It's way better.
So, if you don't mind me asking, what is it that you did study? So, is that what you went into or no? Like for your degree?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay.
That's why. I know, not at all. Because usually during my high school times, like when there's an educational fair or something, I usually go and ask them like, oh, do you have linguistic studies or something like, oh, we have English. Wow, that
Uh,
sounds like translation. That's all.
oh, I see. Okay.
That's why I'm like thinking, why? Oh, you think translation must be English, right? So if you go to countries like, like some European countries or like an Asian countries where they cannot even speak English, I think you die there. No one will
Mm-hmm.
translate to you that you died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting to know. Um, I had one of my previous episodes, like last year, where I read this book. It was titled The Fall of Language in the Age of English, how languages are dying out because English is becoming more and more popular. And yeah, that got me thinking about how important it is for everyone to preserve their mother tongue instead of going to learn English, everybody. It's especially a problem in the West where we have, in countries like Canada and the US, where we accept a lot of immigrants, immigrants come here and the parents would encourage their kids to learn more English rather than their mother tongue because their success depends on it. Like they have to go to school in English. And eventually they lose their mother tongue. And that's so unfortunate.
I
So,
mean, they didn't even have the chance to like at least learn something from their mother tongue or something.
I mean, I don't really understand how kids and their parents can communicate when they don't really speak the same language, but it's more common than you'd think. And there is such a thing as like Korean school every Sunday or like Chinese school during the weekend where kids go there. But I mean, some students get a lot out of it and some students just sort of waste their time and like not really pay attention because it's not like school, you're not like getting a report card and then going off to college and then university with those grades. They're going to learn, but as like teenagers, if you're like 13, 14, you're going to Chinese school, on a Saturday. Like, it's not going to be your favorite thing, you know? And so,
It's like they just go there for the sake of going.
yeah, because their parents are sending them, and their parents are sending them so they don't lose their mother tongue. But as a teenager who just wants to stay home and, you know, play games or something, like, they're not going to love it. And so they don't learn all that much. A lot of them really don't. And I have Korean friends who don't speak that much Korean, and they went to Korean school. I was like, what did you learn there? And they really didn't pay attention. I didn't go to Korean school because my Korean was fine growing up. But yeah, so it's not always ideal to send them to the language school during the weekend. Like, it's not necessarily helpful. And so a lot of immigrant kids are losing their mother tongue, which, like, if you don't care, you don't care. It's like, fine, whatever. But in the big picture of things, the language is dying out with you. Like, you are part of the reason why this language is dying. And I think that should hurt, in my opinion.
I think most of the parents they should be not to say like they force you to learn something. Is they should just like at least approach you in a different way. Like how to say, like, for example, like if I'm learning Japanese, and then I'm just thinking the way like, oh, maybe one day you travel to Japan and you can speak their language. It's not like, oh, you learn English, you go to Japan, you click Google Translate, wow, that's a successful job. Good job, you're going to a wrong place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I'm not a parent, so I really can't criticize parenting methods. It's sort of like, it's similar to what I'm doing right now in my podcast. I'm talking to students and teachers. And while teachers are different from parents, there is also sort of an inherent disconnect between teachers and students. Like, there are certain things they don't understand of each other because their perspectives are so different. And so I imagine it's similar with parents, where I can't, or the kids can't fully understand the parent's perspective until we actually become parents ourselves. And so I understand the intention behind encouraging your kids to study English when you're in an English-speaking country. I guess it's a little different for you or in other Asian countries. Like in Korea and probably in Japan too, they learn English at school at a very, very young age, which honestly, like personally, I don't think that's completely necessary to start learning English when you're like 6, but it is what it is. It's so other countries can also join the international conversation because the universal language is English. But at the same time, you're losing your mother tongue. So, you know, what's the risk with teaching your kids or teaching a whole country how to speak English when you should preserve your own first? I think that should be a priority. But again, I get their intentions.
I think for me maybe slightly different because like me being like Malaysian Chinese, and some Malaysian Chinese parents are a bit different. Like for me, right, my parents, they speak Cantonese for their dialects, and then when they speak to the children, they'll speak in Mandarin. So like you expecting us to understand when they speak Cantonese, and then us will be speaking Mandarin. I'm like, how? I mean, for me, I'll be speaking Mandarin. If like either some other states, some they speak like Hokkien, some they speak Hakka. I mean, all those different Chinese dialects are for Chinese. Like, so if you don't want me to speak that, like after don't know how many years, like for example, I'm from this place, and then my mom will be like, oh, you're born from here, you should at least understand this. I'm like, you know, back then you asked me not to speak, and now you expect me to understand. Wow, mom, good job.
That's so confusing. I'm so confused for you. There's so many languages there. And like a language is not an easy thing to learn so much.
Maybe for me and my friends are slightly different because the way I learn a language is more I think for some of them they think like if you learn a different language, one of the most easiest part to learn the English, I mean not English like language is start to Like all those swear words, all those bad words. Yeah, all those are the easiest ones. And like, I mean, for most of them, they will just learn that and they'll stop. They won't be continuing to learn the entire language. But for me, it would be more like if I, like for example, if Japanese, like, if they want to make it to be more specific, Japanese, there is no swear word that is like, not to say I'm embarrassed to say this, but most of the languages in all different countries, they usually use like private parts, either male or female's private parts to go and swear at some other people, like either your mom, your dad, like your entire ancestors. I mean, if you understand Cantonese, then you understand like how usually this is imagine two people start to talk, right? Like one a friend A and B, they just start to talk like, oh, how are you? What how to say? Why are you late? You're something, your mother or something, and then just bring up the entire ancestor, and then the other friend be like, no, I'm not late, and then they just bring up another ancestor again. I'm like, for what? It's just two people talking, but you bring up the entire generation.
Oh, that's funny. How would you describe your level of understanding of Japanese? I'm curious.
If it's from the JLPT level, I think would be either N4, N3, because for me, like since I can understand Chinese, I mean, I'm not that fluent, I mean, not that perfect in Chinese, but at least those Chinese characters I can at least make a guess, and then like some of the N1 level words I can understand. But then like because for me I can understand Chinese, right, and then it's for sure I can understand some of the kanjis because they share the same meaning, and then some they even have the exact same word. So it's like, oh, it's easy for me. And then the most tricky part is more like all those vocab, all those stuff, right? Like other foreigners, if they can't speak Chinese and they are going to learn Japanese, right, I'll be like thinking, oh, if one day you're going to learn Chinese, right, I think you'll be suffer more than me. You'll suffer more than me because if you understand traditional Chinese, then only you learn simplified Chinese, and then only you go and learn Japanese. Right? That would be way easier because of the Chinese character differences. It's like at least you won't be confused. Like in Chinese, you already have traditional Chinese, you have simplified Chinese, and then you learn Japanese, you have the I forgot what it called, Shinjitai, the Japanese kanji, and then if you learn Korean, some more you have Hanja, or you die lah. Congratulations.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, in terms of kanji, you have that advantage. But in terms of like words, like vocabulary words, there are some words that are absolutely just the same in, Chinese, Japanese, and Korean in terms of their roots and the characters that they use. But also, like, I know maybe, let's say, a few hundred characters. I can't read Chinese and understand because the order of words are different. Like I can't read a sentence and understand what it means because I know the characters. You know what I mean?
Like,
yeah.
I think like some of the Japanese learners or like Korean learners, like most of them they travel to the country before that, and then they came back like, oh, I can't speak this, I can't speak that. Like for me, I never traveled to Japan before, but then I learned I think since 14 or 15. That time I used to take my grandmother's books and like kind of discover that, and then like back then I was a school librarian back then. Like during duty time when there's nothing to do, I'll just take my grandmother's book. I'm not the type of student that will study a lot, but when it comes to Japanese, I will study a lot, literally a lot. And then
Really?
I have a classmate sitting next to me. Like I didn't realize also, like even though I'm from an all boys school so there's no girls there. So he used to understand Japanese, but he cannot read the kanjis because he didn't really like study in detail. So for me, it's like him and me in between. It's like I'm teaching him the words. He's teaching me how to like pronounce everything. So until today, this is how I can speak. Like, I mean, not to say very fluent, but at least the basic ones.
Oh, that's so cool. It's always so helpful to have someone with you, like to, learn a language together.
Sometimes it's kind of sad to see because like how to say, when there's a joke, I mean in between when my my friend said something like, because we understand like the basic Japanese or something, sometimes we got a joke, and then the other friends that they don't even understand Japanese, we are laughing there, and then they'll be like looking at us like, what are you laughing for? No, you won't be laughing. Oh, that's a sad. You don't understand.
Oh, that's funny.
I mean, since you study Korean like from Korea and then from your parents, and then like you go to Canada, and then one day if one day anytime you go back to Korea, like do you think you kind of like forgot how to speak Korean?
I mean, if let's say for whatever circumstance, I have to permanently move to Korea, there will definitely be a learning curve, but it'll be very easy for me to integrate in terms of the language anyway. The learning curve would come from things like I don't read a whole book in Korean, for example. I've read like maybe one Korean book. That's not like, a kid's book, like an actual book, or I don't read the news articles in Korean. Like there are certain words, like the more difficult words that I'm not familiar with. So there would be a learning curve there. But in terms of communicating with people or reading or writing, like just everyday conversational things, I can definitely do. I do right now. I watch a lot of well, not so much right now, but I used to watch a lot of Korean like variety shows. I'm not super into K-drama. I recently watched one, and it was the first K-drama I watched in years. And I watched it because it had to do with the king that I told you about that made Hangul, the Korean alphabet. So I wanted to know more about that. So I watched that like last week, but I hadn't watched a K-drama in years. But I watch other Korean variety shows with like talk shows.
Are you looking at the subtitles or you just listen to those pronunciation?
I just listen. I don't read subtitles in Korean. Yeah, so very familiar with the language. Professionally, there would be a learning curve. Like I work in a school and I am in the field of sciences. Like I don't know how to say scientific terms in Korean, So like those things I would have to learn. Yeah. Oh, if you don't mind me asking, I mean, you can cut this out if you want. I'm just really curious. How old are you?
21.
You're 20. Oh my God, you're so young. Everyone who's doing podcasts are so freaking young, and I don't understand. like I'm super new at this too. I started podcasting last year because I was freaking bored. But I'm 29.
Uh-huh.
And everyone not everyone. One person I collaborated with, I think he was right about my age. But most other people, y'all are really young. And like I never would have thought of doing something like this when I was 21, So it's really cool how things have evolved.
I just started this like 2 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah, but like, I was collaborating with well, for my podcast, I invited student podcasters, and they're all college students, or most of them are, so they're like 18. And I'm like, what? How are you managing this with school as well? It's a lot. So yeah, props to you and all the students doing. I mean, I hope it's kind of unfortunate that you couldn't find a program that has to do with linguistics that you really liked. But I hope you can continue learning languages and study on your own. Honestly, I found it much more enjoyable to study on my own than at school.
I mean, if you study at school, you have all those stupid syllabus, step by step, and
yes!
you would never like to follow them.
Yeah, so I never liked those. And all of this, like, learning Japanese and learning history, however, very lightly, it's things that I did on my own because I was genuinely interested, and that's that's fun. So I hope you can continue doing that.
Back then, before I self-learn, because back then I joined the Malaysian Japanese Friendship Society, yeah, from my state, and like there's one typical. I mean, not to say typical. I think she's kind of old. Should I say it's old? Like a bit traditional minded. Like she just refer to a textbook. Like I think until today I even I even memorized the paragraph. She just keep on reading like this part. Should I read out? I even remember the entire sentence. Like, oh, how much money is I think there's one foreigner like asking for ticket, like how much is this ticket from this place to another place? And that guy replied, oh, it's 350 yen. Oh, 350 yen. And you just pay, oh, should I go from this station to another station? No, you should just go from here, start from 3 o'clock. Oh, thank you, goodbye. That's such a boring conversation.
Yes, but so typical. Oh, I was going to say, because you had brought up JLPT, we found, so my friend who's studying Japanese, he's more serious about it than I am. And we have found that levels 5 and 4 is literally just so stupid. Like, I mean, like let's say the audio component, the listening component, and they say, there's like a stupid conversation, like the one you just said, and like no one in real life actually talks.
I remember there's one question from the listening part, like there's 3 pictures. One picture with a rice, egg, and like tea, and then another one a bit different, and then this person will be saying, oh, Yamada-san, she's going to work. Before that, she is going to eat rice with egg and green tea. Which of the pictures have all these elements? Bloody what?
Yeah, so JLPT 5 and 4, I mean, if I ever want to take those tests, I would just skip 4 and 5. And I would take a test when I'm good enough to take like 3 or 2, Because like no one speaks like that in real life, and they use words that I literally don't care about. Like, for example, I don't care for my purposes how to say, like, how there are different words to address like an older brother, or older male, older female, or younger sibling, or there are different words assigned to those people.
Just imagine that if you really have a Japanese friend, like before that you understand a bit Japanese, right? Like if you learn. I mean, you understand a bit Japanese, right?
Yeah.
Whatever, yeah. Just imagine this really happened, like if you go to Japan, like usually when people you study, like, oh, brother means oni-chan. Sometimes like, and then like the textbook usually they will just write there like, oh, this is my brother, or kochira wa watashi no oni-chan desu. And then usually if you see it in actual Japanese, usually they might be saying like, oh, ani desu, aniki, something else. They'll be like, no, this is not your brother. You're reading something else. I'm like, no, this is my culture, not your culture. Stop reading your textbook or something like that.
Yeah, well, yeah, so there are a bunch of words that like people don't use in real life. Oh, you know what? People learning Japanese for the first time because they love anime and whatever. Something like "O genki desu ka?" Literally, no one says that. Like, apparently, no one says that, and it's just in like stupid textbooks that tell you things that you don't need to know. So like that is, first of all, kind of hilarious, but also is so frustrating. And like that's the kind of thing that's in level 5 and level 4, is those basic textbook things that actually no one uses.
One of the most typical stupid conversation, every time they just look at the weather. 今日はいい天気ですわね. Who cares? It's about to rain.
I know. Yeah, so there are a bunch of words that I don't care about. And yeah, the words that I do want to know are usually the ones that also exist in Korean, that's written in kanji. So like, words, just random words that come to mind, like the words for logic, for example, or like those, abstract concepts. Or my friend and I were talking about like colonialism, how to say colonialism in Japanese and Korean, like those kinds of words I'm interested in. But things like how to address your older brother, like I don't freaking care, you know? So like, yeah, you have to sort of filter through all of that, and you can only realize that people don't actually say those words if you really dig into it.
I think most of the typical ones, if you find it from those traveling books, like back then I asked my dad to buy some, and then I look at it like the first page, like, I'll teach you how to buy ticket. Okay, that's for beginner level, for those who are going to travel. Okay, and then when I turn back to behind, like, oh, you can learn how many 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. I'm like, okay, maybe at first you'll be like, okay, 1,000 yen, 10,000 yen. But then after that, you'll be like billion, trillion. I'm like, I'm going to travel. I'm not going to make investment.
That's so funny. I mean, I hate learning numbers. Like, I feel like it's one of those things that is actually important. Like, you should know, but I just don't feel like it. And I'm a little more willing to learn those things. And my other friend, there are words that he really likes, abstract words. And so when I was what is it called? Isu, I think, for chair. And he was like, I don't care what a chair is. Like, that's not why I'm learning this language. But there are words that like are like sort of in between, like they're kind of important, but they're kind of not. Like chair could be important in a conversation, but yeah. So
yeah. Fun fact. One fun fact. I've seen this question too. Like, I think from the exam too. Like they put in, oh, this cat is on the chair. This cat is below the chair. This cat is on the table. This cat is somewhere further than the table. I'm like, is this for kindergarten level or like what? Are you going to circle? Oh, the cat is over there, like Dora the Explorer. Where's the blue mountain? Over there.
Where's the mountain? It's right there. Where's the mountain? It's right there. So where's the mountain?
Oh my God, look, it's right there. See where I'm pointing? Look where I'm pointing. So stupid and retarded. Huh.
So where's the mountain?
Ah!
So where's the mountain?
that's what it is, though. That's JLPT5. Like, just useless questions that we're never gonna think about. If you're actually serious about the language, it's completely useless. JLPT5. I also don't know katakana very well. Like, I never took the time to learn, because I feel like the words that are said in katakana, they're loan words mostly, right? They're like English words. And I'm like, I don't care.
I think today, if I get to speak to like an actual Japanese, I don't think I can speak that well too, because like my surrounding, none of them, they can speak fluent Japanese. Like, no one can practice with me like in a daily life.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
if I want to count, I think since 14 or 15, yeah, I'm 21. I feel math, how much? 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. 7 years. Yeah, for the past 7 years, I still cannot speak too fluent. It's just a basic one.
Sure, and you can't really get out of that unless, like you said, you speak to a native or someone who can speak like a native regularly. Like for me as well, I have no Japanese person to speak to. Like, I can't speak it, I can't practice it. I never really focused on grammar when I learned Japanese, so I can't, like, in all fairness, say I learned Japanese. I guess I could, but I concentrate on kanji like 80%. And so I can't like formulate a sentence, for example. And the reason why I neglected grammar is because it's almost exactly the same as in Korean. And so if I wanted to learn it, I feel like I could learn it in like 2 days. But so I never did it.
By the way, did anyone like try to speak, like, how to say, those foreigners, I mean, or like Canadians, they see you like, oh, you're Korean, let me just speak some Korean to you with those broken Korean accent, and then just speak to you. It's like pissing you off.
Well, I guess over the years, maybe they would say like, those typical words like 안녕하세요, like for hi, or like 감사합니다 for thank you, because they just picked it up somewhere. But mostly, like, no, people don't really do that. Not a lot of people know Korean. And if it's a person who really loves K-pop and K-drama, they would actually be serious about it. And they would ask me, like, real questions about the language. So, yeah, not a lot of those. Also, just to give you a little bit of a context, there aren't that many Asians where I live. So
you're like the minority there.
yes, absolutely. And so the Asian culture is not sort of everywhere. Like, for example, in Toronto or Vancouver, there are a lot of Asians there. And so even if like you're not Asian, but you live there and you have a lot of Asians around you, maybe you would be more familiar with like some of their words or foods. But here we're a pretty small community of
Actually,
Asians.
at first I thought like Canada have a lot of Asian, like because like if you ever heard of like Cantomendo, the YouTuber, is it?
No.
I mean
but
usually
that's fine.
they make
Okay.
videos. Yeah, they are
Okay.
YouTubers.
Uh-huh.
At first I thought like, oh, there are quite a number of Asians there. Like I mean they are all Chinese. Like, sometimes they make videos about speaking Cantonese or like Mandarin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I feel like I
Yeah.
thought like, oh, actually that's a lot. I mean way more than those from US.
Yeah, so it's just a few select cities. So, for example, in Canada, Vancouver and Toronto, lots of Asians. Where I live is in Montreal, which we're like the third city with Asians, arguably, I think, but a lot less. Like, there's a lot of Chinese people in British Columbia, which that's Vancouver is in British Columbia. So, from what I heard, I don't know if this is true or not, but like I think in Vancouver, was it like more than half of the people there are Chinese or something like that? I don't know if it's actually accurate or people are exaggerating, but anyways, it's to express like just how many Chinese people there are in Vancouver. So there's that. In the US also there are a few select cities that have a lot of Asians. LA is one of them. New York, New Jersey, San Francisco, and most of the other states and cities, it's mostly white people, basically. Very small Asian communities. So yeah, that YouTuber might have been from Vancouver. So yeah, you know what? I'm actually going to, at some point, read about the Malay language and what its history is.
I think most of the people they study more Indonesian than Malay. Yeah. It's a bit similar but different.
Oh my god. Okay.
It's a
Like,
whole new different language.
yeah, so what does Indonesian look like?
You mean as in their face or
No, 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 the language, like their writing system.
it's more or less like Malay, but it's still different.
But is it Roman alphabet?
Yes,
Oh
exactly the
my
same.
god. Like they need to stop it. Like Roman alphabet pisses me off sometimes. Like why can't Roman alphabet be used for the Western languages? Because that's where it's from. It's from the West. Like why is it everywhere? It's freaking colonization. That's what it is.
I mean, I think that is also why I don't really study like those language they use Roman words. Like I mean, not to say that I don't like German or like Italian or something because it's Romanized words. It's kind of not that challenging in a way.
Uh-huh.
That's why I just study more like Japanese take on the Chinese characters. Maybe one day I will study like Russian or like Thai. Back then I used to study like maybe Thai a bit, but then when I look at the alphabet, I gave up. It's too difficult.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, it says Latin script is official in Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia. Yeah, but what was it before? Maybe was there like no writing system before? Because that's also possible, but okay, so historically Malay has been written using various scripts. Before the introduction of Arabic script in the Malay region, Malay was written using Pahlava, Kawi, Renkong scripts. These are still used today. So yeah, there was a different script, but I'm gonna assume that with colonization that was destroyed. So that's what they do.
I don't think they did destroy because some of them they still preserve it. Like they make it like in the museum or somewhere they put it. But I mean in the actual education system we don't do it. We just follow the actual ones.
Sure, yeah. I mean, what is detrimental, like a very bad consequence of it is, like I was saying with the example with Vietnamese, how they don't use Chinese characters anymore and it's completely Romanized, is that you can't read all the texts that came before the switch. And so there's a very clear wall there. Like unless everything is translated, you can't access all that knowledge, all the historical texts and documents. And so that's very sad.
Okay, so in this episode, basically we have Roa from Canada and me being the host again. Yeah, I didn't ask anyone else. That's why it's just me alone here. Yeah, and if you all want to know more like Korean words or something like Korean culture, like her in living in Canada, yeah, just please follow her. Yeah, you have YouTube or something?
I'm most active on Instagram and everything is linked there. I do have a YouTube too though, but for any listeners out there, you can find me on Instagram at Roa_podcast. And yeah, everything is linked on that account. And I have my Chinese character posts that I make regularly because I want to learn Chinese characters. So if that's something you're interested in, come follow me on Instagram.
Yeah, just follow her now. Now, okay. Yeah, that's it for this episode. Bye. And
Bye.
our usual what's it called? Our usual sentence. We are still on the way. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.